Hey folks, welcome to 6 Minutes of Witchcraft with me, Laura Tempest Zakroff. And I'm actually about to film a witchful workout, but want to take advantage of the setup from the other day when I was recording a workshop for Gather the Witches, which is an event happening October, I think 24th and 25th. Definitely check that out, Gather the Witches 2020. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, since I had the setup, I wanted to talk a little bit more about something I posted on Twitter and then shared on Instagram the other day. So let me hit the start and then pull up the image. So this is what I posted. If you haven't reread that introductory witch/pagan/esoteric text in the last 10 years, that you're about to recommend to a newbie, maybe do that first. Override nostalgia and look at that book with what you know now and see if it's still worth recommending. Now, a lot of folks got that, and then a few folks said, but what about? And I kind of wanted to go in a little bit more in depth about that because I feel like some of the things that are brought up actually had nothing to do with what I talked about here, and this is why. So, probably for the millionth time the other day, I saw a newbie ask, I'm looking for books. What are good beginner books on witchcraft? And comment after comment after comment are all these books that haven't been refreshed in 10, 20, 30, 40 years or more, right? That they're the classics, right? Or the bestsellers of the day. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good foundation books, that they're relevant foundation beginner text for now. And here's why. First, so many folks read that book, that first book, right, when they're in their early teens, early 20s, they're new on their path, and it's mind-blowing, right? Like for folks who were in the 80s and 90s and early O's, you discover this book, right? It's not a lot of books out there. You discover this book and you're like, oh my goddess, there are people who think and believe things like me. There's like this whole world that exists, and you're so excited and you're so full of warm fuzzies, this book is your gateway to that world, and so it is holy and sacred. There are no sacred texts in witchcraft. Yes, I know you might have your grimoire and your book of shadows, and that is sacred to you. But there are no sacred texts, right? That we just like, that is not this, right? There are many books, there are many experiences, there are many things to learn. And what happens is in that first reading, right, when you are a newbie, is that you don't have context, you don't have foundation, and so you don't know what's wrong. You don't know that when so-and-so says, this is an ancient religion dating back to the Druids of the blah, blah, blah era. They're like, that's full of shit. Not proven. Can't be true. Here's a whole bunch of information explaining why. That was recently printed in the last 10 years. Look at that. Or that you might not twig to the fact that it's very based in the gender binary, or it's exclusionary to different sexualities, that it is basically a hodgepodge of different cultural practices that have been pulled out of their systems and inserted into this thing, which is why some of them don't really work that well, right? You might not have picked that up in the 90s when you first read that book. And if you haven't read it with those eyes now and you're passing it along because it's your warm, fuzzy book, you're doing people a disservice. Right? You are doing those newbies a disservice. And yes, perhaps they should read that book at some point, but is it really fair to say, here, sort through all of this problematic things? Like there are books that I recommend, but I recommend them with the caveat of, this is a good book, but it was written here, so understand it's got this context and perspective. Or this book was written by this author who's passed away, so it's not going to be relevant past X year, because it can't be updated anymore, right? Again, it's not a bad thing against those authors who have passed on, right? It's not sending shade at them because they are a product of their time. And if they were creating books today, we'd probably see something different from them, but they can't. And luckily, guess what? There are living witches today who can write books, and they are really good. And perhaps we should be recommending those instead, because they are more relevant to today's culture, to the rising generations, and we should allow them to benefit from that, to recommend that. So, doesn't that feel good? It does feel good. And, it's so important that we continue to read, right? It doesn't matter how advanced you get, that you continue to read even those new books that are coming out. If you're like, it's not below you, right? Beginner books are not below you. Like, I'm a witch. I've been practicing for blah, 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 blah years. Still read the beginning books. There are new things to learn. There are new perspectives. There are all the things that you have forgotten about that you've already read. My God, I could fill a room with all the things where I was like, oh shit, I totally forgot about that. That's great. And it's so relevant to right now, right? Because once you have tapped into the pattern that you're part of the tapestry, you start to see new connections and things that you originally missed. So that's a benefit as well. And I know, particularly as an author myself, I expect in 10 years to go back and revisit, actually be less than 10 years now, to revisit Weave the Liminal and update it, to be able to make changes that are relative to my experience, to what feedback I might have gotten from readers, other practitioners, etc., and continue to allow that text to grow. So, thank you, timer. And so that is what it's about, right? Folks can definitely, read those older books. Yes, you can still recommend them, but kind of first really make sure you've passed that bar first of, have you yourself read them recently? Do you also know what that person's looking for? So many times online, people are like, I'm looking for that. And then people just sort of blah. Like, these things are all not related. Why don't you ask them, do you know what you're looking for? Are you interested? There's Max running around. Are you interested in Wicca, in witchcraft, in druidry, in ceremonial magic? And, what are you looking for? What do you think you're looking for? What is exciting to you? If you want to really help somebody, have that conversation with them, and then recommend them books that perhaps are a little bit more recent and more relative to their lived experience now, so that they can have a gateway that is beneficial to their path without a bunch of baggage, without, outdated things. Then once they have read it and they've built that foundation, they can go forth and go back. Because it is vital to know your history, to know where things are coming from. But again, a newbie's not going to have that context or foundation to know, oh, this is where that came from. Oh, it's from this book. Oh, look at that, right? If they are interested in the academic aspect of it, which hopefully everybody is to some extent, they can go into that later and get so much more out of it, rather than a text that seems really confusing and also very exclusionary in so many ways. So that's what that's about. Now I'm going to go film a workout. Bye.